This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. So the other day, before we, basically went into the Friday, we were talking about an IaaS infrastructure as a service, and we said in IaaS you will be getting something known as the RAM and the hard drive, and all the physical components that are required, which should be there inside a machine. On top of this, we said whatever you install, something known as the operating system or something known as the runtime and everything, all these things have to be taken care by you as a user, meaning by you who someone who's like building up the infrastructure, or someone who's like creating all this infrastructure and etc. You have to take care of all these things out there, and the maintenance and etc. is the responsibility that we need to take care. Microsoft in the backend will help you maintain all this hard drive, like all the RAM, all the hardware and etc. All these things is taken care by Microsoft. Now, we said that virtual machine is one of that service, which is basically one of the best example of infrastructure as a service. And the other day we were looking at a Windows 10 virtual machine. We said, okay, fine, we have a Windows 10 OS wherein we can go ahead install this particular machine and quickly, get as many as machines that we need, so that our business basically, or basically our employees can, go ahead, log into this machine and start using it out. And we also discussed what is, let's say, the architecture of the virtual machine. We said that we initially begin with, or let's say, let's come to this particular diagram. We said we initially begin with a virtual machine, meaning we initially begin with, let's say, if we are beginning with the creation of a virtual machine, we need a virtual network, a subnet inside that virtual network. We need something known as a NIC card. We need a public IP, and the private IP comes from the subnet, and the public and the private IP get assigned to the NIC card, and the NIC card finally gets assigned to the virtual machine. And finally, we have something known as NSG, which is Network Security Group Rule, which controls who can access, how can the virtual machine talk, and etc. So this is where we are, guys. So everything good until here. Does anyone have any questions till here that I can take? Anything? Anyone?
Sir, Nick card is, we can able to see actually virtual machine we created earlier, right? Uh,
Right. Yeah. Was that a question? I'm sorry, I didn't get it.
yeah, I want to see Nick card in hotel, right? So virtual machine we are able to create it yesterday, right?
Yes.
Yeah, same way
So
we
a
can
NIC
able to.
card. So let's see, NIC cards or network interfaces. Yes, you'll be able to create it on the portal itself. If you only want to create an NIC card, like you'll have this particular portal creation here, and you can just give the name of the NIC card and etc. and have it assigned to, let's say, the virtual networks and all that stuff. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay, you can create a NIC card individually, but we don't do NIC cards individually. Like we mostly don't do, or we mostly don't go ahead and create the NIC cards individually. We create it along with, let's say, a virtual machine service. Is that okay? But the other day we were looking at something known as a Windows 10 operating system. I said that, okay, fine, we have a Windows 10 operating system, and a user like you or a user like me can go ahead and do something known as an RDP into this machine by using the NSG rules. Because the NSG rules, we have said that, okay, fine, please go ahead and add a port number known as 3389, so that I, as a user, will be able to establish a communication with this virtual machine over 3389, which will enable me to do something known as a remote desktop. This is what we said, and we said, okay, fine. From a consumer perspective, from, let's say, I as a consumer, will now be able to see the machine, will now be able to interact with this machine and etc. And we said that, okay, fine. From a consumer perspective, this is to basically enable multiple people working on the machine. This is to make sure that if we have, let's say, multiple employees and we don't want to purchase physical machines, we can go for something known, sorry, we can go for something known as the virtual machine service out here. Now, this is from again a consumer's perspective. But what if I want to build a virtual machine from a business perspective? Meaning, as a business, I want to create a virtual machine, but I don't want to use a home operating system. Now, a home operating system is for, let's say, home users, like, let's say, businesses which are there as a home user, which just want to use this machine as a regular machine, like a laptop and etc. But from, let's say, a different perspective, from, let's say, a pure business perspective, I don't want to use this as a home machine. Rather, what is happening right now is that I have a developer who's just say writing a code. Who's writing a code? I've asked him to write a code. So he's writing a code in a language like HTML, like something basic. Let's start with something basic. So he said, okay, fine, I'm writing a code in HTML. Now this code, I need to make sure is given to, let's say, the people in the world, because I'm developing an application. Let's let's say we develop an application called xyz.com, and this application needs to be accessed by millions of people that are there in the world, for which, again, coming back to our first earlier sessions, in order to make sure that I give this code to the people outside the world, I need something to help me expose this. And we said we need a server, and in our case this server is the virtual machine itself. Now I'm talking about virtual machine not as a service but as a server. And since this is, let's say, I'm using a virtual machine as an internet service, I am calling this as a web server. So now I'm talking this machine as a web server and not a home operating system. I'm saying, okay, fine, I want to use this particular virtual machine service as a server, as a web server, so that whenever my developer develops some kind of a code out here, he should be able to go ahead and use this service or use this server, put his code inside this, so that the world can look at this, so that the world can look at this particular code out here. This is what I want to achieve from a business perspective. So let's get with this. Let's start with this procedure and let's see how can I convert a virtual machine into a web server so that it can be accessible over the internet. So is this clear, guys? What we want to achieve, what we want to try? Is this okay? Is everyone following with me? Is everyone able to follow this, guys?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I'll just go ahead. I do not have a resource group with me right now, so I'll just go ahead and create a resource group. So I'll say it is VMRG is the name of the resource group. I'll just say a location like Central US. I'll say review and create. And going inside this resource group, I'll just go ahead and say create. And right now, I will now say that there's an option here to create a Windows Server 2019 data center. I'll say create. And as and when I hit this button, I'll be diverted to a new page wherein this will now start asking me different details like, okay, fine, what is the name of the RG? So I'm giving the name of the RG, and it's now asking me what is the name of the virtual machine. I'll say it is a web server virtual machine. And now it's asking me what is the location. So I want to take the same location as the resource group is. So I'll say it is Central US. I'll say Central US. And I'm coming down and saying something known as availability options. I'm not selecting anything right now. I am not selecting something known as an availability option at this point. I'm just keeping it aside. We'll have to look at it again. Security type again is standard. This is important. The other day, I selected something known as Windows 10 Pro 20H2 Generation 2 and etc. Meaning I have used a home operating system the other day. I've said that this is for, let's say, I am creating machine for a consumer so that they can start using this machine just like I'm using my laptop. But today, I'm doing it a bit different. I am taking a different operating system today, and this operating system is called a Server 2019 Data Center. So, so I'm specifying here that this is not a home operating system, but this is a server. And now I'm just coming down. I'll just scroll down. I'll see what is the available size. Let me take this particular size out here. So this is the available size. It says, okay, fine, you have the size available. So great. And now it's asking me for a couple of details like what is the username, what is the password, and please confirm the password. So I'll just say gives particular details like username is something like this and password is Microsoft 001. So I'm just giving the username and password so that at a later point in time, I as an administrator in the backend can log into this machine and can interact with this machine over something known as an RDP session, over something called as in the RDP session out here. So just scrolling down and it says, okay, fine, which public port do you want to allow? Now, the other day when we were doing the class, what we did is we selected none here. We went inside the machine after it was created, and then we added something known as 3389, which is the RDP service. Now, today, what I'll do is I'll do a bit different. I won't say none here. I will say allow selected ports, and I will select a couple of ports right now. The very first of which is RDP, which works on 3389. And one very important thing, guys, is that we are now trying to basically convert this machine into a web server, meaning whichever code the developer gives me, the HTML code should basically be downloaded on top of the server, and people like you and like me should be able to see this code over the internet. Over the internet. And if I need to allow this machine to communicate to the internet, to the entire world, I need to open up a port called AT for a service called HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, meaning this is, let's say, the URL that comes in whenever you try to interact with the internet. Like when you hit google.com, right? The entire URL will be like something like HTTPS colon / google.com, meaning this is the indicator that I want to use service over the internet. And since this is a web service that I'm creating right now, I'm saying please open up this port called HTTP. So there are two ports basically that I'm right now opening out, which is HTTP, and the other one is called as an RDP. So RDP so that I as a I as a backend user can log into this machine and can interact with this machine. Port 80 so that users online can start looking at the code that is inside this machine. So these are the two things basically that I'm doing out here, and I'm saying next. It's now asking me what is the disk type that you do need. In my case, I only need an operating system disk. So I'm saying I just need an operating system disk out here, and the disk type is a premium SSD. I'm saying I need a premium solid state drive here, and which is locally redundant. This is fine. And I'm also saying, okay, fine, you know what? I need it to be encrypted using the platform managed keys. So whatever is the default, I'm just selecting this out. And I'm not selecting any data drives here, so I'm not doing any data disk at this point. I just need an operating system disk. I'm good with one disk, and I'll say networking. And since a virtual network is very essential for me to go ahead and create this out, Let me go ahead and create a virtual network. And let me say this is yes. I'll just change the name of the VNet. I'll say it is VNet web server, and the address space is okay. It is 10.0.0.0/16, which is giving me somewhere around 65,536 IP addresses. And I'll say this is subnet 1. So instead of default, I'm just changing the name of the subnet to subnet 1, and I'll say okay. So subnet 1, the new virtual network, the new subnet out here. And since this is a web server, since this is, let's say, something which I want to basically, I want the users to interact over the internet, I am creating a public IP here. And this public IP is called web server VM hyphen IP. This is something that I'm creating here. And this is something that I'm ending up selecting out here. Finally, I have things like NIC card group, security group, and etc. Public inbound ports. All these things is by default. I'll say management. And under management, there is something known as boot diagnostics. For now, I'll just click on disable. I'll explain what exactly this is and etc. I'll just click on disable right now. And finally, I'll say review and create. So no advanced, no tags. These are optional in nature. I'll just say review and create, and I'll start creating a virtual machine out here. So I'll say create. Now this will take like about 2 or 3 minutes of time in order to get this created. And so let's revise, or let's see what all we did. So we created a virtual machine. We said we gave the name of the virtual machine firstly. And very importantly, today, different than the other day, we selected a image, or we, let's say, selected something known as Windows Server 2019 instead of Windows 10 Pro. So we are not doing a home operating system. We are rather creating a virtual machine with a sorry, with a server operating system out here. And then we went ahead and said we only need a OS disk, and then we made sure we create a new virtual network, and then finally we hit the create button in order to create the virtual machine. And very importantly, I enable two ports out here. One, the RDP, so that a user from the backend can go ahead and, let's say, interact with this machine. Two is a port known as HTTP, which is an internet port, because I want to use this machine in order to take my code and expose it to, let's say, the world outside. So that's the reason I went ahead and said, okay, fine, I need a port known as HTTP, which works on something known as AT, and I opened it out. So these are the two things that I did. So guys, any questions still here? Anything that I can take till here? Anyone, guys? Anything?
So subnet, we have taken one, right? Default one subnet will come, right?
So that default subnet, I've changed the name to subnet one. So you can have the default subnet also. Like the name is anything is okay. I've just changed the name of the default to subnet one.
Okay.
Any questions, guys? Okay. So the virtual machine seems to be created. So I'll just say go to the resource. And if I look into the resource group, there are a couple of resources that got created. So let's inspect them initially. So we have a virtual network. We have a public IP. Sorry. We have a public IP. We have a network security group rule. We have a network interface card. We have an OS disk, and we have a virtual machine finally that got created. And we have attached all these resources to this particular virtual machine out here. So we did not do anything here. Like the Azure portal itself, like helped us out to to create all these things out. We just selected things out here. Now what I'll be doing is I'll go into this particular web server VM. Now can anyone tell me how should I connect to this machine? I want to log into this machine. How do I do it? Can anyone tell me? Can anyone help me with this?
We need to download RDP or
Hmm.
port, I mean IP port.
Okay, so this is the IP, right?
Yeah.
I'll just copy the public IP address. There is something known as copy public IP address to the clipboard. I copied it out, and I'll just say remote desktop connection. And once here, I'll just give the IP here. I'll say connect, and I'll say more choices, use a different account, and I'll say user, and then give the password basically that I have created out here. And I'm basically connecting to this particular session as an administrator user using that particular ID and password out here, and I'm logging into this machine. Now, the other day we again created, let's say, a Windows 10 home operating system. So we got, let's say, the buttons like please accept this and all that stuff. But here it's a pure server. This is, let's say, different from a home operating system. And in a server, as in when you load this server, you have the screen that is coming up called as server manager dashboard. I haven't done anything. I haven't opened up anything. This is the screen that opens by default. And it says, okay, fine, welcome to server manager dashboard. Tell me, what do you want to do with the server? Tell me, what exactly are you here? Why exactly are you here? And what do you do? What do you want to really convert the server into? Now, in my case, I want to convert the server, or I want to use this server, or I want to use this service and convert it into a web server, into something known as a what? A web server. So I will have to do it from this particular page. I will have to convert this service into a web server from this particular page. How do I do that? I come here and I say add roles and features. So here, so firstly, I'm here into the server manager dashboard, and I have an option here under something known as configure this local server. And the option here is add roles and features. And I'm saying add roles and features. And it says, okay, fine. Do you want to read this and etc.? I'll say great, not a problem. I'll say next. And in this screen, I will select something called as role based or feature based installation. This is the option that I'll be selecting. I'll say okay, next. And now it's asking me to select sorry, to select a server, and I'm selecting a server called as a web server VM, and this is the private IP address of this particular server. So I'm just selecting this is the server that I want to do an installation on. I'll say next, and finally this is the page that is asking me how do I want to use this service, or how do I want to use this particular server out here. And I have a lot of options here. There's a lot of things that I can do, but I'm specifically interested into one particular service known as web server, in brackets IIS, Internet Information Services, IIS. This is called as Internet Information Services, guys. I want to install this particular feature out here called web server IIS. I'll say add this feature, and I'll say next. I'll say next. I'll just do next, next, and next out here. I'll say install. All I am doing is that I am going into, let's say, the server manager dashboard. I'm saying add roles and responsibilities, or add roles and features, selecting the server. So I said, okay, fine, this is a Win server, basically, whatever I am working on. Then I said add the role, and in the role, I am selecting a role known as web server IIS. So in the role, this is important. I selected the role, I said add this role out here. So I selected the role known as web server IIS, and I said IIS stands for Internet Information Service. This is how we convert a Windows server that we have created into a web service, into something known as a web service or a web server. This is the installation procedure. Now, this installation takes like about 2 minutes of time. And after it gets installed, let's see how we can use this machine. Let's see how we can, or what we can do with this particular machine out there. So any questions until this point, guys? Anyone, any questions? Does anyone have any questions till this point, guys? What did we do? How did we do? And etc. So we created a virtual machine, and this time we said that we are creating a Windows Server virtual machine. Rather than a Windows 10 home operating system, we created a Windows Server Data Center 2019. So this is, let's say, the image, or this is, let's say, the operating system that we ended up creating. And after creating, I said I'll firstly log into this machine, and I'll said okay, fine, I'll go ahead and install something known as a web server IIS, so that this machine can be now considered as something known as an IIS service, or something known as a web service out here. And I went inside, and I said okay, fine, please go ahead, add the roles and features. Selected the server, and I selected the role called web server IIS. And after selecting the role, I said okay, fine, please go ahead and install this out. Now the role is installed. Now what do I do with this? After the role is installed, what do I do here? Is that I'll take this I'll take this public IP of this machine. I'll just put it here in my browser. I'm not doing anything. I'll just say enter. As and when I do it, now I see a page coming up called Internet Information Services. Welcome to this home screen and etc. And this page is only able to come up because we installed something known as a feature called IIS on top of this machine. Now, without having installed, or without basically installing this feature, you will not be able to go ahead and use this machine as a web server. Now, this machine is telling you that okay, fine, I'm a web server. Whatever that I have inside a folder known, I mean, I'll talk about a folder basically, I'll talk about the destination folder, and whatever I have inside this machine, I'll expose it in the form of this particular image out here. Now, what I will do is that I'll come here, and I'll go inside a folder. I'll go inside, let's say, the folders and views. I'll go inside this PC, and in here, I'll go inside the C drive, and I am interested in one particular folder called inet pub. inet pub out here, meaning inet pub is nothing but a full form for Internet Publishing folder out here. So what I'll do here is that I'll go inside this folder called inet pub, and inside this folder, I have a subfolder called www root. This is very, very important for me. I'll go inside this, and I have two things out here. One is a page called iisstart.html. It's a HTML document. The other is an image called iisstart. Now what I'll do is I'll just open up this image for our demo. This is how the image looks like. I'll just do some highlighting to this image. So some scrambling to this image, and I'll say, okay, fine, this is virtual machine or VM. I'll save this image out. And if I go to the internet now, and if I refresh my page, this is what I'm able to see. Meaning, whatever is there inside this particular folder called inetpub www root, meaning whatever supported documents like HTMLs, like let's say JS files and etc., are being published over the internet through this particular virtual machine as acting as a web server service. Now, not only me, but even y'all can actually try this out. If you basically, I can send this IP across to y'all. If you hit this link anywhere, any part of the world, wherever you are, if you hit this link, you'll be able to see this particular service that is running out. Can anyone confirm if you're able to see or not able to see?
Yeah, we able to see.
Which means that my particular service out here is now running on the internet, meaning I have exposed my particular code, that is like a HTML code out here, over the internet, and I have allowed the users to interact with my virtual machine service over the internet using this particular page. Now, what if I want to just go ahead and let's say enhance this particular feature? I want to, let's say, go ahead and download a HTML code, or I just write a HTML code, and I want that particular HTML code to be accessed over the internet. Now this is a simple demo, so I'll just close this out. And I want to use the internet here. Okay, I want to use the internet inside this particular server, but the access to internet is by default restricted on let's say on Windows servers. So what would I do is that I'll again open up my server manager dashboard. So I'll just type in server manager. Now I have the server manager, and one very important thing, guys, is that in our operating systems, in the home operating systems, right? This is my operating system, my screen. You will not find this something known as server manager. This will not come installed. You cannot install this because I am using a Windows 10 home operating system, whereas this is a Windows 10 server, or let's say a Windows 2019 server data center operating system, which by default comes with this particular mechanism, which is a very biggest difference between a home and a data center operating systems that are available out there. Now, once I'm here inside the server manager, I'm going inside the local server, and there is a feature here called IE Enhanced Security, Internet Explorer Enhanced Security Configuration, and it is by default on. So I'll do one thing. I'll say, okay, fine, I want to switch this off because I want to use the internet on this particular machine. I'll just click on the on button. I'll just say off and off. I'll just say okay, and I'll just close this tab. Go into the internet. I'll use the Internet Explorer. So you do not have a Microsoft Edge or let's say a Google Chrome browser basically on top of the servers. You will have only the Internet Explorer. So I'm going into the Internet Explorer and I'll say download free HTML templates. So I'm just typing in, let's say, a search result for downloading the free HTML template. Just go down and look for a site known as freecss.com. Let's see. Is that? Yes, let's go to this particular site known as a freecss.com, which is absolutely free in order to download the templates and etc. And let's download, one particular template out here. So I'll say, okay, fine. This is the template that I want to download. And you have a download button here. I'll just go ahead and say download this out. I'll just save this out into my local machine, meaning into, let's say, the Windows server. And I'll just say open folder. Once it's downloaded, so I have opened the folder here. I'm just saying extract all. And I'm just extracting everything that is there inside this folder. So this is like an again, let's say this is a HTML document out here. So great. So what I'll be doing right now is that I have all this code, or let's say all the HTML templates that I've downloaded inside the downloads folder. And I know for a fact that whatever is there inside this folder called inetpub and wwroot is being exposed on the internet in this way. I'm able to see it on the internet in this way. So what if I go ahead and delete this out? So I've deleted both of, let's say, the HTML document and also the image out here. And if I now refresh this particular page, it says 403, there is a forbidden access and etc., meaning you do not have the permission to view into this directory because there is nothing that is inside it. So I'm failing to basically understand what should I display to you and etc. That is what the error message this particular service is actually throwing me out. So what I'll do is that I'll say, okay, fine, I have downloaded, let's say, a good amount of templates. Go into this folder and grab this all these templates out here, or all these folders out here. I'm just doing a control C, which is copy, going into, let's say, the inetpub folder and into, let's say, something known as a wwroot and pasting it out. That's it. All I'm doing is this. And once I come back and once I refresh my page, I'm able to see a complete website out here, which I'll be able to interact with, which I'll be able to basically hover, and I'll be able to do a lot of things out here. And if I were a HTML developer, I can just develop a simple HTML template, just go into my virtual machine, convert this virtual machine into into an IIS server, and just put all the code here, and the website is ready. This is the biggest use case scenario of using a virtual machine from a business perspective. Now, we looked at a consumer perspective wherein we said that we want to go ahead and use this particular virtual machine as our own computer, as a home desktop, so that different employees in my office can take the advantage of it. Later, now I'm telling that this particular virtual machine service is actually converted into something known as a web server, so that people in the outside world can just look at this particular website that I have designed in any code. I can put this code, I can manage this code in the backend, and in the front end, in the UI, you will be able to see all these things out here. Okay. Any questions that I can take till here, guys? Any doubts till here that what we have done? Or do you all want me to do a quick revision for this? Does anyone want me to do a quick revision on what we've done? Any questions, guys? Anyone? Anything? Any questions?
Yeah, IAS installation by default it will come, sir. Not need to
No,
be installed.
no, we have to install this out. So what I did is that after the server loaded, I had this page called, or I have this kind of a page out here. So IIS will not come by default with a server. You will have to install it. So how do I do it? I said add roles and features. This is the screen that I had. I said next. I said installation type is a role based or a feature based installation. Then I said server selection. I said next. And in here, this particular thing, right, which is called web server IIS, was not checked. So I just checked it out. I said next. I said okay, fine, next and everything. And then I said install. This is how I was able to get the IIS got installed on top of my virtual machine that is running a Windows 2019 data center service. Does that answer your question? Does anyone have any questions, guys, that I can take? Any questions? Anyone, anything? Is this clear? So we created a virtual machine. The first thing we went ahead, created a virtual machine. Second thing, we installed something known as IIS. Third, we downloaded a very simple HTML template, went inside something known as inetpub folder, and just put all that code there. And our service was started, or we have started our service out here. So these are the three steps that we have taken. And very importantly, in order to make the best use of the service, please create a virtual machine with a Windows Server operating system and not a home operating system. Don't go for Windows 10 Pro. Go for a Windows 10 or go for a Windows 2019 data center service out here. Is that okay, guys? So now one quick question for you all. I have installed IIS. I've done all these things out here, and now my service is up and running. It's great. It's doing a lot of things and all that stuff. Now by default, I only said that I need a C drive. There was only C drive basically that I began, and I selected a disk with premium SSD, and Microsoft will give you just a temporary drive to in order to store things out and etc. This is just temporary in nature. So you'll get a C, you'll get a D drive which is temporary in nature. But right now I realize that I also need to store data, and C drive is very small to store data because C drive is to install programs, features, and etc. I need another drive here, like an F drive with let's say 1 terabyte, 1024 GB. But I have forgotten to add this while creating the virtual machine. So the question here, guys, for you all is: can I add it now? Yes, no, maybe. Anyone?
Yes,
Yes,
We can
yes.
create.
we can add.
You can add it. So yes, that's the right answer. We can add it, but let's see how you can add it. So this is my virtual machine, and here you have the disks, right? So there's something known as disks out here. So I'll just go into the disks here. And by default, I am having an OS disk. It's telling it's a Windows Server 2000, like it's just telling it's a Windows Server OS disk out here with a premium SSD with a size of about 127 GB and etc. So I'll say great, not a problem. I want a data disk right now, not an OS disk. So I have an option here to add something known as a data disk. So I'll say okay, great. Let me go into this option and I'll say create and attach a new disk. This is the option that I'm selecting. And as and when I as and when I do this, it's asking me what is the name of the disk. I'll just say it is a web server VM underscore data disk underscore one. So this is the first data disk that I'm adding. And I'm saying this is a premium SSD. And the size that I want is something like 1024. This is the size of the disk that I want to add because it's the size here is in GB. So 1 TB is nothing but 1024 GB. And I'll say save. So now it's telling, okay, fine, I'm creating a disk for you. And after creating the disk, I'll go ahead and attach this particular disk to the particular virtual machine out here. Now it says successfully created the disk. And finally, it says I'm updating the virtual machine out here. So let's give it a minute and see what happens out here. So this is how I go ahead and attach the disk and update the virtual machine. So finally, I went ahead and added the disk to this particular virtual machine. So what did I do again? I came here, I said create and attach a new disk, and it asked me like disk name, the size of the disk. So these are the two things that I have given. These are the two parameters that I filled in. And after creating this out, let's go into a resource group once again and see what all we have here. So earlier we had an OS disk. We had something known as an OS disk out here. Now we also have something known as a data disk. This was not there before. Now I went ahead and added this out. Now let's come back to our virtual machine to see how can I use this disk and etc. So I'm in my virtual machine and I still have a C drive and a D drive, and let's say this is a DVD drive which is dummy. And if I refresh my page, now even though I do this couple of times, I'm not I'm not able to see my disk out here. I'm not able to see the data drive out here. Now the reason being, now very importantly guys, I have added this particular disk at the infrastructure level, meaning I have added this disk on the Azure portal and I've attached this particular disk to the virtual machine, and I have done this at the infra layer. I'm talking about the infrastructure layer out here, and I've added this disk on the infra layer here. But the operating system that is running inside my virtual machine doesn't know that I have a disk out here. It doesn't understand that. So I will have to tell this operating system that, you know what, there is a disk that I have attached on the infra layer. You now have to start using it out. Now, how do I tell the operating system? Again, I come to the server manager, and in the server manager, I have something known as file and storage services. So I go into something known as file and storage services, and here I have something known as disks. And inside the disks, it is now basically identifying what all the disks basically that I do have. And I have a 128 GB OS disk, a 32 GB temporary drive, and I have a 1 TB, but it doesn't know what this is. It says it is unknown and etc. And this 1 TB is only getting reflected because we have added a 1024 GB data drive here. So I'll say go ahead, do a right click here, and I'll say new volume. And I'll say next, I'll say next, I'll say okay. And here I'll say okay, fine, I want a 1024 volume here. And you can select a drive letter. For example, I want a H drive here. I'll say next, I'll say next, and I'll say create. So this is how I tell the operating system that please use this drive. Now if I go here, I now have a new volume H where I can store all my data. This is how I will be able to go ahead and tell my operating system that I have added something on the infra layer. So what did I do? I came here into Server Manager, went into something known as file and storage services, went into disks, and I had a disk that was basically offline. Did a right click and I said new volume, just did a next, next, and next, selected the drive letter, and attached this particular disk to, let's say, the virtual machine service. So this is how I can get it attached out here. Guys, is this clear? Does anyone have any questions with this? Is this clear, guys? Is it okay?
So without added in the portal, we can add it directly in server as well.
No, you cannot directly add it in the server, because the reason being, if I don't add it in the portal, you won't find it in the server. Because here I cannot create something. I cannot, let's say, create a volume. I need to create a volume firstly, and then I need to add it inside the server. Is that okay?
Yeah, but disk name is different there.
This disk name is for us. This is
Okay.
for us on the portal to understand what is the name of the disk out here. The disk name here is for the operating system to understand. We
Okay.
can also give something like, now it's like your system, right? It's like your computer. When you go into your computer, you have a Windows C and everything, right? So this is how the operating system will identify it. Now this is for our identification. Like for us, without going into the operating system, this is how we identify that this is a OS disk and this is a data disk and etc. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Any more questions here, guys? Did anyone not follow? Please let me know. I'll be more than happy to explain again. Are we good with this, guys?
Sir, can we use this data disk for another virtual machine or
Okay, great question. Yes, we can do that. I'll tell you what we can do with the data disks and etc. We can do that. I'll explain what is the procedure and how we can use it or how we can attach it and etc. Okay. So we are going to have an entire session on disks because there are a couple of concepts that we need to cover. So I'll take everything tomorrow, that what is a disk and how can you back up a disk and what you can do with a disk and everything. Is that okay?
I have a question, Kiran.
Yeah, please go ahead.
In real-time scenario, how frequently will you create the virtual machines?
So
Is there
in
any
real,
procedure while following it?
so good question again. So in a real time scenario, it depends upon what you want to do with this particular virtual machine. Meaning, are you basically running a web server on top of this virtual machine? If yes, then we have a team known as an architecture team, which will tell us when to create a virtual machine, how to create a virtual machine, which size you need to use, and etc. If you are going into a project that is already running, you will not create it. They will, the machines and everything will be already created, and you just have to manage it out. But if you're going into a new project, then yes, you'll have to frequently create it out, and the frequency depends upon the requirement of the virtual machine and etc. And as I said, we will have a team known as an architecture team. Usually in let's say in most of the companies, the architecture team will help or will tell the DevOps team what to create, how to create, when to create, and etc. So in that way, we can go ahead and create this out. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, Kiran. And one more. So we will create virtual machines, right? So is there any ticketing system like so this much disk space we need, or else this file system and all? Is there any procedure we are following it?
Yes. So normally what happens is that now we are creating the virtual machine in a manual way, but in a real-time environment, as a DevOps engineer, you will use something known as Azure DevOps service in order to create it out. And Azure DevOps service by default comes with something known as a ticketing. It has something known as boards where people will go ahead and assign tickets to you. So that's the protocol that we need to follow. But since we haven't done Azure DevOps, I haven't gone into that particular section of it. But just a high
Okay.
level overview, does that answer your question?
Yeah, Kiran. Thank you.
Any more questions here, guys? Okay, guys, and if there are no further questions, then we're good to close the day. Have a great Sunday ahead, and from tomorrow again, the batches are going to start offline and online the same time. Okay, so people who want to attend offline can come to the class, and people who want to attend online can continue coming online. Is that okay, guys? Okay, guys, thank you, and have a great Sunday ahead, and meet you tomorrow. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.